It is 336 BC in the Palace of Pella. The hall, lit by flickering torches, hums with the whispers of nobles and warriors. Philip II, the king who transformed Macedonia into a powerhouse, walks triumphantly, unaware of the dark fate awaiting him. Suddenly, a treacherous strike. A dagger slices through the air and Philip falls dead. Amid the chaos, a 20-year-old rises, his eyes ablaze. Alexander. With the kingdom at risk of splintering, he is about to prove he is not just an heir, but the future conqueror who will redefine the world. Prepare to witness the rise of the man whom destiny called the Great. The year is 356 BC, and Macedonia, a land of vast fertile plains and towering mountains to the north of Greece, is undergoing a profound transformation. For decades, this kingdom had been regarded as a peripheral force, almost irrelevant in the complex political landscape of the Greek city-states. But now, everything is changing, and the one responsible for this revolution is the ambitious King Philip II, a strategist who knew how to combine military strength with diplomatic cunning. Philip was no ordinary king. From a young age, he displayed extraordinary military vision. He reorganized and modernized the Macedonian army, creating the famous phalanx, a tightly packed formation of spearmen that moved like a wall of steel. This innovation transformed Macedonia's forces into a relentless war machine. But Philip did not rely solely on brute force. He was also a master of diplomacy. He knew how to manipulate alliances, corrupt leaders, and subdue adversaries without ever raising a sword, consolidating a kingdom that many considered ungovernable. However, the Macedonian court was a dangerous place, rife with constant intrigue and conspiracies. Ambitious nobles plotted in the shadows, ready to challenge the king's power. It was in this hostile environment that Alexander grew up. The son of Philip and the intriguing Queen Olympias, Alexander was raised to survive and thrive amid the political complexities of the kingdom. He learned the art of war and the craft of political maneuvering, absorbing lessons that prepared him for the Herculean task ahead. Alexander's education, however, extended beyond the military training grounds. Recognizing the potential of his heir, Philip brought the renowned Greek philosopher Aristotle to be his tutor. Under Aristotle's guidance, Alexander studied philosophy, science, and ethics. More importantly, the philosopher instilled in his pupil the idea that the world was vast, filled with wonders, and worthy of conquest. This expanded worldview sparked in Alexander an ambition that reached far beyond the borders of Macedonia. The relationship between father and son was complex. Philip was a monumental figure whose achievements overshadowed any of Alexander's attempts to stand out. Yet Alexander never stopped wanting to prove his worth. He longed to demonstrate that he was capable of achieving even greater feats, a desire that became a constant source of tension between them. The situation worsened when Philip remarried, inciting Olympias' wrath as she feared for her son's position in Macedonia's future. While Philip consolidated his power and began to dream of unifying Greece against the Persian Empire, Macedonia became a true powder keg. The palace intrigues persisted, and Greek city-states like Athens and Thebes resisted the idea of subjugation. Alexander knew that it wasn't a question of if he would have to fight for his place, but when that moment would come. Macedonia stood on the brink of a new era, and at the heart of it all was Alexander, ready to face the destiny that awaited him. The year is 336 BC. In the palace of Aegae in Pella, the capital of Macedonia, the corridors are filled with festivities. Philip II stands at the peak of his power, and the occasion is his daughter's wedding. Leaders and diplomats from all over Greece have gathered, witnessing the splendor of a king who dreamed of uniting the Greek world against a common enemy, the vast Persian Empire. The atmosphere is celebratory, but also tense, for for the Macedonian court is a place where loyalty is often only a facade. As wine flows and the festivities heighten, Philip walks toward the main entrance, surrounded by his guards. His presence is commanding, a leader accustomed to inspiring both fear and admiration. Suddenly the crowd parts, and a man appears unexpectedly. Pausanias, one of the king's personal guards, who until that moment had been considered loyal. Without hesitation, Pausanias pulls out a dagger and drives it into Philip's chest. The great king of Macedonia falls, and the celebration turns into a scene of shock and horror. Pausanias tries to flee, but he is swiftly caught and killed by the other guards. However, his execution does not resolve the mystery. Instead, it only deepens it. The entire court is in turmoil. Why would Pausanias, a trusted guard, commit such an act? Was it a crime driven by personal vengeance, or was he merely a pawn in a far more intricate game of intrigue? Suspicions spread quickly, and many eyes turned toward the royal family, particularly to Olympias, Alexander's mother. Olympias was known for her ambition and fierce determination to protect her son's interests. Rumors suggest she may have had motives to ensure that Alexander ascended to the throne unchallenged. Some even claim that she was seen with a look of satisfaction during her husband's funeral. Yet there are more questions than answers, and the evidence has never been sufficient to prove anything conclusively. Conspiracy theories abound, but Alexander, now only 20 years old, must act swiftly to prevent chaos from tearing the kingdom apart. Amidst the whirlwind of rumors and instability, Alexander stands out for the cold resolve with which he responds. Within hours, he displays a level of leadership that astonishes even the most cynical members of the court. He orders a series of precise executions to eliminate any potential threats to his throne. His first political act as king is to deliver a brief yet powerful speech, promising vengeance against anyone who dares to destabilize Macedonia. With commanding words, he reasserts his authority, establishing himself as an unyielding ruler. The situation remains precarious. Ambitious nobles continue to scheme in the shadows, and factions within Greece see Philip's death as an opportunity to revolt against Macedonian dominance. Aware that any sign of weakness could be fatal, Alexander moves swiftly to consolidate his power. He visits the army, reminding the soldiers of his heritage as Philip's son, while also promising a future filled with even greater conquests. Through his presence and stirring speeches, Alexander secures the loyalty of the troops that form the backbone of his kingdom. Still, the threat lingers. The young king now faces the challenge of maintaining control over an unstable Macedonia while dealing with internal enemies and the hostility of the Greek city-states. But Alexander is no ordinary ruler. He is a man driven by purpose, destined to shape the world according to his will. The assassination of Philip may have shaken the kingdom, but it also paved the way for Alexander to show the world the strength of his ambition and resolve. The days following the assassination of Philip II were a true trial by fire for Alexander. Now, at only 20 years old, he had inherited a powerful yet fragile kingdom, where alliances were volatile and betrayals came easily. There was no time to mourn or hesitate. Alexander understood he had to act with speed and decisiveness, consolidating his power before instability could spread throughout Macedonia. The first threat to his reign came from within. Some nobles viewed Alexander's youth as a sign of weakness, an opportunity to challenge the authority of the new king. Factions began to form, and even relatives of Philip II considered rebellion. Simultaneously, the Greek city-states, long under Macedonian dominance, began to stir, whispering about the word freedom. Neighboring tribes to the north, such as the Illyrians and Thracians, watched closely, ready to test the new ruler. Alexander, however, was no naive youth. He knew that any hesitation could cost him the throne, so he responded with calculated force. He gathered his most loyal generals and ordered a series of swift executions to eliminate potential traitors and conspirators. His message was clear: there would be no room for dissent. Even those who doubted his ability to rule or hesitated quickly realized that Alexander was not a leader to be underestimated. The court, which had once questioned his strength, now saw him as a relentless king, determined to protect his legacy. With internal threats crushed, Alexander turned his attention to the army, the true pillar of his power. He knew he needed the full support of the forces Philip had forged. Donning his gleaming armor, Alexander addressed the war-hardened veterans, men who had fought countless battles under his father's command. With a mix of respect and inspiration, he spoke to them candidly. "You fought alongside Philip and won, but now I promise you something even greater. Macedonia will be the spear that pierces the heart of Persia." His speech ignited the morale of the soldiers, who, even under the weight of mourning Philip, began to believe in Alexander's vision. As the young king consolidated his position, news of Philip's death spread rapidly through Greece, sparking the spirit of revolt. Thebes and Athens, in particular, saw this transition of power as a golden opportunity. Their leaders believed they could challenge Macedonian rule before Alexander had the chance to secure his grip. Orators like Demosthenes stirred the crowds, painting the new king as an inexperienced youth, lacking his father's skill. But Alexander did not give them the chance to strengthen their resistance. With a response as swift as it was decisive, he marched his troops south, determined to crush any rebellion. Thebes, the city that dared to defy the conqueror, was his first target. The siege was brutal and unrelenting, and Alexander displayed a level of strategic skill that many veterans had not anticipated. When Theban defenses finally crumbled, he ordered total destruction. The city walls were torn down, the city razed, and the inhabitants sold into slavery. The message was clear to all of Greece. To challenge Alexander meant facing utter ruin. With Thebes in ruins, the other city-states, including Athens, trembled. Alexander, understanding that a similar approach to Athens could have disastrous diplomatic consequences, chose a more cunning strategy. He sent envoys with an offer of pardon, provided the city recognized his authority. The leaders of Athens, fearful of Thebes' fate, accepted. Thus, Alexander united Greece under his control, not as an ally, but as a conqueror. The young king had transformed his youth into a weapon, acting with the boldness and determination that few expected. Macedonia was secure, Greece had been tamed, and Alexander could now look eastward, toward the vast Persian Empire, with the certainty that he was destined for something far greater. The peace Alexander had imposed on Macedonia was soon tested by Greek resistance. News of his ascension to the throne sparked hope and boldness among the city-states, especially in Athens and Thebes, which believed the young king might be vulnerable. Athens, the ancient heart of Greek culture and philosophy, quickly began efforts to unite allies, while Thebes, known for its military strength, prepared to challenge the new ruler. The stage was set for a crisis. In Athens, orators like Demosthenes roused the populace, portraying Alexander as an inexperienced tyrant who could not maintain the authority Philip had secured. Nationalist fervor grew, fueled by the belief that, with the right leadership, the Greek city-states could finally break free from Macedonian control. Thebes, proud of its heritage and military reputation, joined the cause, forming the backbone of a resistance movement that promised a fierce struggle. Alexander's reaction was swift and merciless. He knew he needed to crush any rebellion before it could gain momentum. With a speed that astonished even his own generals, Alexander assembled a formidable army and marched south. His target was Thebes, the city that stood as a symbol of resistance and a direct challenge to his rule. When the Macedonian forces arrived, Alexander offered Thebes a chance to surrender, but the Theban leaders, confident in their strength, refused. The siege of Thebes became one of the most decisive and bloody episodes in Alexander's early career. The city fought bravely, but the discipline and strategy of the Macedonian army were overwhelming. Under Alexander's command, the attacking forces systematically dismantled Theban defenses. When the city finally fell, the Macedonian king made sure to send a clear message. Thebes was razed, its walls destroyed, and most of its citizens were sold into slavery. The destruction was absolute, a brutal example that reverberated throughout Greece. The fall of Thebes sent a deep chill through Athens. The Athenian leaders, who had previously waved flags of resistance, hesitated as they realized the extent of Alexander's power. Understanding that destroying Athens in the same way could alienate the remaining Greek allies, Alexander opted for a more strategic approach. He sent envoys with an offer of peace, ensuring that Athens could avoid Thebes' fate if it acknowledged his authority and renewed its submission to Macedonian rule. The offer was accepted, and Athens, reluctant but aware that it could not prevail, laid down its arms. Alexander's deft diplomacy, combined with his strategic use of fear, kept Greece under Macedonian control without further bloodshed. Yet even in peace, the message was clear. Alexander was a ruthless leader, but also shrewd, capable of balancing brute force with negotiation. The success in subduing Greek resistance further transformed Alexander's reputation. He was no longer seen as a mere young prince trying to assert himself, but as a dangerous and determined leader, prepared for even greater conquests. Greece was, for the moment, pacified, and the king's gaze now turned eastward. The vast Persian Empire lay before him, a monumental prize that Alexander began to envision as his inevitable destiny. With Greece finally under control, Alexander could turn his attention to the true prize, the vast and powerful Persian Empire. This colossal force spanned 3 continents, encompassing lands from the mountains of Anatolia to the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, and even further east to the borders of India. Yet for Alexander, the immensity of Persia was not a cause for fear. On the contrary, it represented the ultimate conquest, a glory worthy of his ambition. Alexander knew that a campaign against Persia would require more than just a strong army. He needed impeccable logistics, a well-planned supply network, and the absolute loyalty of his men. Under his leadership, Macedonia transformed into a war machine in constant motion. Weapons were mass-produced, and supply routes were established with military precision. At the same time, Alexander ensured that the morale of his soldiers remained high, promising riches and the immortality of glory to those who followed him. Preparing for the invasion, Alexander crossed the Hellespont, modern-day Dardanelles, in a gesture filled with symbolism. He knew this crossing marked a significant milestone, the point where he left Europe behind and stepped onto the Asian territory of Persia. Before advancing, he paid tribute to Greek mythological heroes like Achilles, his personal idol, reinforcing the connection between his destiny and the deeds of legendary warriors of the past. This act inspired his men, who began to believe they were fighting not just alongside a king, but alongside a true hero favored by the gods. Alexander's first major test on Persian soil came swiftly: the Battle of the River Granicus. King Darius III, underestimating the young conqueror, dispatched a force comprised of his satraps and Greek mercenaries, expecting the river to be a sufficient barrier. Yet Alexander was a bold and unpredictable commander. He ordered an immediate assault, personally leading the charge, crossing the river under a hail of arrows and launching his troops at the Persian forces with a ferocity that left the enemy stunned. The battle was fierce, but the victory was decisive. Alexander's courage as he faced danger on the front lines inspired his troops, who followed him with an almost fanatical loyalty. The Persian forces were routed, and Alexander's triumph at the Granicus did more than just open the way for further invasions. It also sent a powerful message to Darius and the entire Persian Empire. Alexander was no ordinary leader. He was a force of nature, someone who would not be easily stopped. With victory in hand, Alexander pressed on to liberate the Greek cities of Anatolia, many of which were under Persian control. Some cities eagerly allied with him, while others needed to be coerced. Yet Alexander, showing both cunning and strength, treated his new allies with respect, ensuring that his promises of freedom were kept. His diplomatic approach solidified his position and reinforced the idea that he was not merely a conqueror, but also a liberator for the Greeks of Asia Minor. As Alexander advanced, his legend grew. He was seen as the heir to the great heroes, someone seemingly destined to alter the course of history. But he knew that the true power of the Persian Empire still awaited him, embodied in Darius III, who was beginning to recognize the gravity of the threat closing in. For Alexander, destiny was just beginning to unfold, and he prepared himself for even greater challenges in his campaign against an empire that dominated vast regions of the ancient world.